Hi, I'm Ari A, and I'm joined by Sonia Kim and Hongyu Lee today to share findings from our recent study, Learning Autocompletion from Real-World Datasets. Historically, state-of-the-art ML code completion models, such as Tab9, have reported training high-accuracy language models on very large open-source software datasets from GitHub. In the code completion literature, these models are typically evaluated on their ability to predict randomly sampled tokens provided surrounding program context. Various studies have explored comparing different language models, such as Ngram, RNN, and GPT-2, as well as representation schemes, whole token, byte pair encoding, and copy mechanism. But the question of how well performance on code sequences appearing in already written GitHub projects translates to real-world code undergoing modification in the IDE has only recently been posed. We were surprised and inspired by the work of Hellendorn et al., who described the concept drift and distribution differences between code sequences randomly sampled from GitHub projects and a corpus of real-world autocompletion usages. They examine various autocompletion models from literature and find that performance drops substantially when evaluating on developer activity rather than synthetic benchmarks. Their study outlines several meaningful differences between code sequences appearing in version control and IDE autocompletion. One example shown here is the completion kind distribution. Method tokens are autocompleted far more frequently than these tokens are prevalent in randomly sampled code sequences. Based on this concept drift, we believed that we could build a better ML code completion experience for hack software developers at Facebook by incorporating real-world IDE usage and autocompletion examples into our models. Our research demonstrates the modeling improvements that followed when we moved from training on already written code, randomly sampled from version control, to these real-world datasets. We also devoted some focus working to understand the distribution differences between version control and IDE code. The rest of our talk is organized to first provide more background on our problem domain and the tool we work on. We'll then discuss the datasets, models, and experiments we leveraged to answer our research questions. Finally, we'll conclude by sharing our results, findings, and main takeaways.
Based on the motivations that we mentioned earlier, we proposed several research questions. And in order to answer those questions, we need the following experimental setup. First, what are the data sets that we use to train our models? Second, what are the models that we compared? Third, what are our evaluation methodologies? For the data set, we are using these three data sets that we collected from our hack repository. First is the baseline data. In the baseline data, we are collecting source files randomly sampled from version control repository, including 977K files. For the autocompletion data set, we are collecting accepted completion suggestions logged in the IDE. And in total, we have 3.4 million completion events. In the edit dataset, it's a mixture of synthetic and real-world data. We're collecting code edits logged from each file save operation in the IDE. And in total, we have 1.6 million edit sequences. For the models, first we use the Ngram model. We use the KNLM implementation for fast training and fast inference. And second, we use the transformer model, which is the state-of-the-art in sequence modeling, and we were using the GPT-2 implementation. Third, we used the transformer model plus the byte pair encoding. The BPE technique is a way to tokenize your input sequences into smaller subword units in the purpose of reducing vocabulary size and further improving model performance. For our evaluation methodology, first, we evaluate our models offline. We separate our baseline and autocompletion datasets into training, validation, and test samples in a ratio of 8 to 1 to 1. In our baseline test samples, we randomly select identifier tokens, for example, local variables and method call tokens from the test sequences for evaluation. In the autocompletion dataset, we use whatever the tokens that are accepted by the real IDE users and let the model predict them. We also performed live A/B tests on over 6,000 hack developers internally at Facebook. We integrated those auto-completion ranking models into the IDE for these hack developers. Upon each completion triggered, up to 3 high probability completion suggestions will be shown at the top of the list, with remaining completion items ordered alphabetically. The developers will be randomly assigned to one of these 3 groups. Each group corresponds to a model that is trained on one of the baseline or auto-completion or the edit training corpus. This is an example of what you will be seeing in the IDE. Basically, you can see that like the top 3 items with this Thunderbolt icon are basically completion suggestions produced by the auto-completion ranking model. And you will be receiving different auto-completion suggestions based on different experiment group.
Now let's discuss some of the results following the research questions listed in our paper. The first research question was, does software language model performance vary when real-world autocomplete events are used for evaluation instead of identifier samples from code and version control? In other words, does performance vary when evaluating on real-world developer data? And the answer is yes. From this table here, we can see that for all 3 models, there is a significant decrease in accuracy when evaluating on real event data. This tells us that there is indeed a concept drift between the datasets, and the previous methods of evaluating on committed code may not be the best idea, since it does not correspond well to real developer success. So then we asked, how do we perform better on real-world data? This brings us to our second research question, which was, do language models train on real-world examples better predict developers' completion suggestion selections? And the answer again was yes. For all 3 models, we can see that when trained on actual real-world examples, it was able to outperform training on the baseline data set. And one interesting thing to note here is that we also combine the baseline and the autocompletion data set, hoping that the neural network might learn better from more training data. But that did not seem to be the case here. And we believe this might have happened because the benefit of having more training data is overshadowed by the drawback of the concept drift by combining the data sets. And with these results, we then ask the question of how our models actually perform, not on evaluation data set, but on actual developers. Because while it's important to evaluate on offline data, since our eventual goal is to boost real developer productivity, doing an online evaluation is equally as important. Thus, our next research question was regarding, when deployed in the IDE to rank completion suggestions, do language models trained on real-world examples drive greater tool usage? And the answer again was yes. For our online experiment, we're measuring the average number of click-throughs per developer per day, and for both models, we can see that we were able to see more than a 5% improvement when trained on real-world examples, both at a p-value of statistical significance. This, combined with the offline evaluation, now gives us full confidence that the model trained on real-world autocomplete data provides the best performance. And now that we have the optimal model to deploy in our IDEs, we kind of wanted to do some more analysis on why this model performed the best. So our final research question was, what are the differences between code and autocomplete, or in source code, and autocompletion that result in divergent completion ranking behavior? In our paper, we go through these different things in detail that you can read in our paper. So in conclusion, this paper shows that there is a concept drift between committed code and version control versus real-life production logs. This results in a significant difference in performance, both in offline and online evaluation. And from our studies, we have found that the most optimal data set to train for autocomplete is using real-life autocomplete event logs. For further detail regarding this work, please check out our paper. And with that, this concludes the talk.
All right. Hi, everybody. We are We're here in the last Q&A for the code completion session, and we're discussing the paper "Learning Autocompletion from Real-World Datasets." We have several authors here to help answer the questions. So, and I think that Hongyu will be the one answering most of them, although Ari and Sonia are here as well. Okay, the first question comes from Mikhail Yevtignev. Are you going to release an auto-completion data set? Maybe not the exact data set you've used in the paper, but some other data sets sourced this way?
So currently, I don't think we have any plans to release any data sets, or for example, like this, like code completion events that we logged from the IDE. But maybe in the future, that's probably one of the things that we might do.
Actually, I don't know if we will, just because it's internal code.
Yeah.
So we probably will not.
All right. So actually, I have a question for you on this. Given that you were trying to do this on internal code, is there something special about Facebook internal code that perhaps doesn't get the results generalizing to other types of code?
I wouldn't imagine so. There's a great diversity of software development that happens at Facebook across mobile services, data pipelines, machine learning, and so the models that we produce and integrate into the IDE serve like a very large and diverse user base at Facebook. So I think that there wouldn't be kind of effects, concept drift significantly between Facebook software development and external development.
Unless there have been some particular expectations, I guess, of the way that code looks or the way that people write, that might be part of the developer integration into Facebook that you may not be fully aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly possible. But for the purpose of this paper also, just because like we wanted to benefit and boost our developers, we chose to use internal code. I think there's also value in maybe taking a larger data set from GitHub, training that, and then also fine-tuning it maybe on like Facebook internal code and see if there's any difference there as well.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the audience? Okay. Let's wait for a couple minutes.
You don't bite, and there's no stupid questions. Feel free to ask.
Okay. Do you think it might be useful to fine-tune the code completion model for the particular user or company using the actions of the developer in the IDE, or will this be computationally impractical? So thank you, Mikhail.
So I think that there are two kind of suggestions here, and one seems like a really good idea related to what Sonia was getting at, sort of doing a base training on a large, unlabeled, unsupervised training on code sequences from GitHub, and then a fine-tuning on developer activity within a specific company that can sort of make model focus on writing code specific to that company. And so that seems like super feasible and valuable. As far as like using a specific user's actions go, I think personalization is definitely an interesting question as well. Like, are there different ways that that users use code completion, and can we learn things from users' historical behavior that help us give them better recommendations? That's not a problem that we've looked at, but it's definitely interesting, and I would be curious if Sonia and Hong, if you have thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think there are some like previous work that discuss about like using like local cache, like for example, like the files like in the same the same project that like the code that you're currently writing, and then like that actually boosts the auto completion performance. Like I think that is some form of
personalization.
Yeah, that's correct. So I think like that's totally possible.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Ariaz Iqbali. Thank you for the nice talk. Do project features like project size and number of developers working on a project have any effect on the results of the distribution of next tokens?
I don't think we've actually looked into this. So Ari, do you have anything?
Yeah, one thing to note is that code at Facebook tends to be developed in sort of a mono repository fashion, and that there are sort of links and dependencies sort of between subgroups. And so I guess I'm trying to say that all of the code at Facebook is connected in some way, and so it would be hard to define what the boundaries between the different projects are. It could certainly be an interesting investigation to see how some of the distribution statistics and usage varies by code that's sort of frequently edited and looked at versus code that's not touched very much. But it wasn't something that we got to explore in this paper.
All right. Thank you. The next question is from Peng-Yu Ni. Thank you for the talk. I'm wondering whether one of the reasons on models trained on auto-completion dataset being better may be that the code in this dataset is newer than the code in the baseline dataset, and thus is closer to the evaluation set.
So I think we collect the dataset at the same time. So basically we're taking the snapshot of the repository at a certain timestamp, and then we basically collect like all the auto completion events before that timestamp. So basically, I think they should have the same like they're basically collected at the same time. So I don't think that's actually affecting.
And in the paper, actually, we talk about this. It's called recency bias, to see if newer data affects it significantly, and we found that that's not the case.
All right, thank you. The next question is from Alex Hoppin. Did you measure if you were able to suggest names of new variable declarations based on the context?
So it's certainly a possibility for auto-completion that there are new kinds of tokens that static analysis won't be able to recommend, like what you should name your variables, kind of like string literals and numeric literals, like what we heard in the last talk are options for auto-completion driven by models rather than program analysis. For our online experimentation, we focused purely on kind of tokens that were coming out of a static analysis language server tool and re-ranking those. And so that set eschewed kind of some of these novel tokens, like suggesting names for variable declarations, strings and literals, and so on and so forth. We focused purely on kind of re-ranking the token types that static analysis could tell us were for sure valid.
All right, thank you so much. We are about 10 seconds from the end of the Q&A. I wanted to use this opportunity to thank everybody for listening to the session and asking questions, and for the authors for the presentation.